What defines a Souls-like? Is it the difficulty? The dodging paired with the iframes? The brutal deaths. Well, here's my description of what makes a Souls-like, so you'll understand why I'm picking these games to review. The first thing that comes to mind is the in-depth boss designs with multiple ways of defeating the said boss. And of course the game can have one or two gimmick bosses, but even then the overall idea of the game remains. The second thing are the brutal, punishing deaths, where you lose your currency to the ground, and if you die the second time, you lose it for real, with the exception of special mechanics like items or spells. The third is intricate map design that invites you to explore in order to progress not only storylines but also your character. The fourth are the bonfire checkpoints. You can call them graces, lanterns, crystals, or whatever you want to. To me, it will always be bonfires, where you level up, heal your character, organize your items, and catch a breather. And last but not least, is that you only have one currency. No such things as EXP and gold, but souls, and you spend your souls to buy a house in Miami, where you're going to spend more souls to pay your mortgage, and you're gonna spend the rest of your days in souls debt. And that is all for my Souls-like description. I could add that Souls-like have awesome music and a neat minimalistic way to tell their story, but I don't think that would be fair to delegate these characteristics only to one genre, when I believe they were well utilized way before Demon Souls was even a thing. Anyways, enjoy a second intro now to the video. Okay guys, so we're back to the full Souls-like experience. Even though Nioh has different currencies in the game, every Souls game kinda has it too. With humanities on the first game and all the Covenant items, I feel like it had different types of currencies. Still, the level upgrade and some other upgrades are still done with the soul equivalent in Nioh. And before we start grading, I gotta say this, Nioh is awesome. And I feel it tackles a lot of aspects that Souls fans love in a different way. And as I grade it, you guys will know why. But it had a lot more room to improve and build on their mechanics and features, which I hope they did on Nioh 2 and Nioh 3, which at this time of the recording came out a week ago. And now, without further ado, let's start with the gameplay. So, every aspect that a Souls-like has that is in Nioh, the developers decided to add a new mechanic to it. Kinda feels like you're playing Dark Souls 1 for the first time again, because you basically need to understand the main mechanics as if you were a baby in a Souls-born world. They mess with the stamina, or ki as they like to call it in the game, recovery, because it recovers by itself, but if you get hit while it's recovering by itself, it eats all your stamina and you get your stance broken, and you're vulnerable to a critical hit from your enemy. Not only that, they decided to add a skill level to it, so you need to press a button once your bar fills the first time. There's 2 fills happening, so your stamina recovers completely and you can recover it faster. So there's a bonus to actually mastering these timings. That also counteracts the stamina depletion and stance breaking mechanic that they added to the game. And not only that, every boss hits like a fucking truck. So you need to master that mechanic, otherwise it's gonna be a living hell. Also, every weapon type has at least 3 stances, and you gotta learn at least the ones that you're gonna use on your build, because they are necessary if you want to combo and actually do damage to your enemies. Some enemies will have a very short window and you want to dash as much damage as you want, so you need to learn the combos and special abilities of each stance that you're planning to use. Anyways, the gameplay consists of you going to missions with some intricate level layout and some objective at the end of the level. Once you get the objective, you can teleport back to the map screen that is basically your main hub. Yeah, your main hub is the map of Japan, by the way. It is a neckbeard's wet dream. There you'll have the main missions that you need to do to complete the stories, and the side missions that you can do for extra gear, levels, upgrades, and online items, of course. Talking about the online aspect of Nioh, I was actually surprised to see that the online community was still active even almost 9 years after its release. The co-op and PvP is pretty much the same as Dark Souls PvP, and co-op of course, but they added a sort of PvP offline aspect to it where you can interact with phantoms of players from their world, and you can fight an NPC version of their characters and even farm for their gear. Which, given how they approach the gear in the game, this little mechanic was really a game changer. To summarize, the gameplay requires skill and has a learning curve that makes you look like an infant trying to walk for the first time when you first play the game. The game doesn't have the open world-ish of Dark Souls that you want to explore and interact and come back to the same place that you were in open shortcuts, but it does have levels, and in those levels there are shortcuts that you can go back to the bonfire or shrine that you rested before. But it is a good mission game with a Dark Souls type of combat. And also, the online is really satisfying for the development of your character. So I'll be giving it a nearly perfect grade, a 4.5 out of 5. The bosses and mobs are all based around Japanese myths and culture, with the exception of the very few that are inspired in the Celtic and British myths and culture. They usually have variants, and because the game has this mission setting, everything is recycled and put in different levels. Yet somehow the recycled bosses never actually feel the same from the first time that you fought them. But that is because they are either put in a duo or trio boss scenario or in a gauntlet scenario, which makes the new encounter even harder from the first time you fought them. And I can't really say that I love this, but I definitely don't really hate it. It is a smart way to get the most out of your assets, scripts, and your whole jigamarolls. But as I said, because it is somewhat difficult, it doesn't feel too repetitive, unless you're using them to farm for items. Then I can see it become extremely repetitive. Unlike other Souls games, you gotta be using your consumables to beat most of these bosses, cause if you don't, oh boy, you're gonna have a bad time. It took me a while to understand that, but once I did, the progress felt way smoother. Anyways, I gotta give the bosses a 3.5 out of 5. They were kinda cool, but they were plenty, and most of them didn't feel too special, just kinda hard. So I accidentally already described the map design before in the intro. The maps are divided in mission levels and the main hub, which is literally Japan's map, divided in areas. The mission levels are usually somewhat intricate, with shortcuts, checkpoints, and a few different ways to navigate it. That is when they aren't just straight up a boss arena. They also share the same, I guess, characteristic with the bosses and mobs category. What I mean by that is that they are recycled for some missions. And even though they added different ways to approach the same map, sometimes they really feel repetitive. And that is why I'm giving it the same grade as the last category, at 3.5 out of 5. Here the game did something that I always wanted to see in a From Software Souls. Weapons and armors have rarities and passives. You gave them the old Diablo treatment, way before Elden Ring had that mod. The only thing that they forgot, in my humble opinion, was that they forgot to add special weapons for each category. That would have access to a new moveset or something similar, but because the game has 3 stances and different movesets for each stance and weapon type, I can see how that can be a bit over the top. Kinda like putting a hat on a hat, but still, I would enjoy that. I would like to have like a Moonlight Greatsword with a specific pattern that you can get in different rarities, but it has a specific pattern instead of the general Greatsword pattern. You know what I mean? The magic comes in the way of Nioh, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I don't know very much of Japanese. If you know me, you know that I'm a cunning linguist. I speak both Portuguese and English, kind of, both. But again, the magic comes in a way of Onmyo and Ninjutsu, which are consumables, but even being consumables, they can deal massive damage. They kinda gave the Dark Souls 1 and 2 treatment for those, where you basically get a set number of casts and you can reset those at every bonfire. By the way, they are essential to buff yourself and to debuff bosses. To make the boss fight less of a sounding experience and actually give you a chance to survive more than 1.5 attack. And because I like the idea of having Diablo items on a Souls game so much, I'm giving this category a 4.5 out of 5. Okay, for the balance, some side missions may have one too many waves of enemies / bosses, and the game may have a learning curve with its mechanic and items and excessive amounts of fucking damage from some bosses. But once you actually learn the mechanics and what items to use and the features, it actually feels kinda balanced. Not kinda, it actually feels pretty balanced. But I understand that a lot of people don't really want to study or read a biblical amount of text to understand mechanics and enemy weaknesses and what you should use on your build to like make you survive attacks and deal enough damage to kill bosses. Most people want something that feels intuitive, like blocking will block damage, attack will deal damage, and if your stamina is recovering halfway to full and you get hit, you won't lose it all. Right? Yeah. Still, balance, I'll have to give it a 4 out of 5. If you get the muscle memory to press one button a second after you finish attacking, it will feel way more balanced. Otherwise, you might think that this grade is insane. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really notice the music at all. I'm not trying to be mean to the artists that made the soundtracks, but there wasn't any song that got my attention. Which actually can be good because there wasn't any song that was so out of place or terrible that made me get out of the immersion that the game provided. So because of that, I'll give it a solid 3 out of 5 because if I don't remember much, but if I go back I probably hear like old Japanese music and maybe some fast-paced Japanese music for the bosses. It was most likely background music that fit the aspects of the game, the essence of the game, the aesthetic of the game, right? So yeah. Nioh is amazing, the community still plays it even though it is in its 3rd iteration, which that should be enough to prove that it is a good game. But unfortunately sometimes I still play NBA 2K, which proves that sometimes we go back to bad games just for that feeling that you used to give us. But anyways, Nioh is actually amazing, that's why I'm giving this in-depth review of the game. It feels amazing to play and it is even fun to grind on. So without further ado, the final grade for Nioh is 3.83 out of 5, which I'll round it up to 4 out of 5 because it really deserves. If all these games that I'm grading were students and I was the teacher, I would clearly see how creative and strenuous Nioh was and would bump its grade up just like Dumbledore did it for Gryffindor at the end of every fucking book for no reason at all. Just because he had a crush on Harry, I don't know. Now for the tier list. Okay guys, you can see that we have Wukong at an S tier and Lords of the Fallen 2014 at a C tier. I'm gonna go with Nioh being a mid A tier, and I believe and I hope that Nioh 2 it's maybe up A tier to low S tier, and Nioh 3 could possibly be a comfortable S tier. But I haven't played yet, I just have that hope because Nioh was a strong start for the franchise. Anyways guys, thank you guys for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.